Death Note is an anime about an intellectual battle royale between the schemes of Light Yagami, the self-proclaimed god of the New World, and the mind of the greatest living detective, Elliot, and subsequently his successors. Successors that only end up taking on the Kira case because L died, but why did L, the smartest person in Death Note, fail where Near succeeded? Stick around until the end of the video as I tell you the real reason as to why L not only lost the game, but was doomed from the start. In case you didn't know, I'm Inviso and this is Medianalysis. Here we go. For those of you who've tangled with the 64 squares of chess before, you understand the intricate power dynamics at play within the game. But even if the closest you've ever gotten to a knight is a medieval fair, stick with me. I've got a little thought experiment for you. Imagine a standard chessboard. Now, here's the challenge. Using only the queen, the most formidable piece on the board, can you checkmate the king? Before we get into all that, let me ask you something else. What happens when the strongest piece on the board plays a perfect game, but still loses? But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's first take a moment to establish exactly who the pieces are. Light Yagami is the king, the protagonist-antagonist hybrid whose actions drive Death Note. Powerful? Yes. Calculating? Absolutely. But vulnerable? Without a doubt. Just like the king in chess, Light's movements are limited, always one square at a time. In chess, the queen is terrifying. She is the piece notorious for dominating the board, a piece with the combined strength of a rook and a bishop, gliding across ranks, files, and diagonals like an unstoppable force. In Death Note, that queen is Elliot, the world's greatest living detective. From the moment L appears, his presence is immediate, powerful, and unmissable. His first move? Broadcasting a message to Kira and setting a trap. That's not a pawn's move, that's a queen entering the board move. One could even say it was a queen's gambit, perhaps. In fact, the earliest a player can even use a queen in the game of chess is on their second turn. And what episode did L debut in again? L operates a lot like a queen. Versatile, unpredictable, and always applying pressure. Every confrontation with Light is a check, a forced move, a narrowing of options. He is everywhere and nowhere, and he's closing in on Light. And all Light can do is try and bait him out. But, as any chess player knows, pressure doesn't always mean victory. And this is where a chess analogy kicks into full gear. I want you to recall the thought experiment I proposed earlier in this video. Can you, a skilled chess player, use just the queen to checkmate the king? Now hold on a second, Bill, I hear you saying. Just the queen? That's impossible. You need other pieces for support, for control of the board, or even just to defend the queen. Exactly. A lone queen, no matter how powerful, can be danced around on an open board. The king has just enough room to avoid her. At best, it's a draw. And at worst, she is cornered and taken out. A queen alone cannot checkmate a king. And that's L. He's the strongest piece in the early game, but he's alone. The police don't trust him fully. He has no true successors yet, except for the one that set himself on fire a year before the Kira case even started. And he's chasing a king protected by a divine notebook and a Shinigami with a soft spot for the enemy. So, what happens? Simply put, he loses. Despite all his brilliance, L is outmaneuvered, not because he made mistakes, though we'll get to that, but because he was fighting a losing battle, a lone queen against a king who cheats at every possible turn. And just like that, the queen is captured, L is removed from the board. And in perhaps the most tragically ironic off-screen moment in anime history, we're left to assume that Rem wrote something like, L dies due to diabetes, complications of excessive sugar consumption while thinking too hard about Kira. And hey, maybe that's the true cause of death, not the dramatic conclusion that we got. Okay, maybe not, but it's a fun thought, yeah? If you ask me, L's love for sweets probably deserves a spot in his cause of death alongside the whole Death Note thing. However, the game doesn't end there. The board is still playable. Two new pieces appear, Near and Mello, and in our chess analogy, they are the Rooks. Now, the Rooks don't have the flair of the queen. They're straightforward, linear, with no diagonals. No flash, just cold, straight power. But they come in pairs, and when used together, they're deadly. Here's something cool to think about. On a chessboard, the rooks are not just strong, but they're symbolic. In fact, they begin the game on opposite corners of the board. They're the furthest pieces away from both the enemy king and from each other. Just like Near and Mello, as when the queen has been captured, they're not just far away from the enemy king, but also from each other. Mello leaves and becomes a mafioso, while Near becomes a private investigator. Two pieces on completely different ends of the moral and strategic spectrum, but, like Rooks in the endgame, they find a way to coordinate, and once that happens, the very dynamic and state of the game shifts. And this is where it gets good. One rook on its own? Strong, sure, but not enough to corner a king. Not reliably anyway. It needs help. It needs another rook to pull off something special, something known as the ladder checkmate. This technique is gorgeous in its simplicity. One rook cuts off a row, the other delivers a check. The king backs up, rook follows, cut off, check, repeat. And eventually, the king gets squeezed until there's nowhere left to go. If that sounds familiar, it's because that's exactly what Mello and Near do. Mello is the leading rook, rash and reckless. He forces Light into frantic moves, he steals the death note, blows up buildings, he pushes Light to his emotional limits. Near is the following rook, calm and collected. He tightens the suspicion on Light, quietly builds his case, observes the chaos that Mello creates and uses it to trap Kira. When Mello gets too close to danger, like during the raid on the Mafia base, he almost gets captured, but like a rook retreating along a file, he backs off, just enough though. Every move Light makes now, it costs him. And finally, after the game has narrowed down, after Light's freedom of movement is gone, Near delivers the final check, the checkmate. Kira finally falls. And even in death, El was still able to serve Light, aka Kira, a food they both enjoy all too well. Just desserts. In chess terms, this checks out. A queen is worth 9 points and a rook is worth only 5, with 2 rooks together being worth 10 points total. Not much different, right? But those 10 points become far more valuable when coordinated. The ladder checkmate is something a queen cannot do alone. Near and Mello weren't individually better than El, but together they were enough. Together they could stand with El. Together they could surpass El. And now, acting as one, they face the Kira who defeated El and beat him at his own game. More than that, the only reason they could win was because they weren't trying to be El. They weren't copies of the queen. They were rooks. Their distance, their contrast, that was the point. That was the plan. El was a genius, undoubtedly the greatest mind in the show, something that Light, Near, and Mello all admit, both to themselves and to each other. But he fought alone, and that's why he lost. Light had allies, schemes, and divine interference. El, on the other hand, had logic and sugar. The latter being what actually killed him, based on his diet, if you could even call it that. But even that wasn't enough. He got close, so close, perhaps even too close. But he was one piece against a king that could not be stopped by the actions of just one singular piece, no matter how powerful that piece may be. So the next time you watch Death Note, don't just watch the story. Watch the game in its entirety as it unfolds. Notice how the queen takes center stage early on in the show. Notice how the rooks start on opposite ends of the board, distant and divided, but as all the pieces fall away, the rooks come together, and in the end, they win. This wasn't just a battle of justice versus evil, it was, at its core, a chess game. Elegant, brutal, and strategic. And even if you don't like Near, or the second half of Death Note, you have to admit, in a game of chess, sometimes 2 rooks are better than 1 queen. However, what do you make of all this? Did you see the chess parallels in Death Note the same way? Or perhaps you have a different way of viewing them? Let me know in the comments down below. But at the end of the day, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you want to see more Medianalysis, you can click on the playlist on the right. Or if you just want to see my most recent video, you can check out this video on the left. However, that's where I'm gonna leave off for now. Thank you for staying until the end of the video, and a big thank you to all 1,384 people who bought tickets to the Inviso show. Tell me what you thought about this video, and what you want to see me talk about next time. But, until that next time arrives, I'm Inviso, and that's all for my spill. Like, comment, hit subscribe. I look forward to when. I'll see you next time.